What's up everyone, welcome to Workshop Rebuild. In today's episode, I'll share with you guys my latest project. In my previous episodes, I worked on the John Deere 317, which I completed. I'm currently working on a John Deere 300, which I have almost done. And now I stumbled upon a new tractor, which is a John Deere 400. So I'll dive right into the tractor itself. We have a John Deere 400 with a 19.9 or a 20 horsepower Kohler K532. This tractor happens to be a 1978 garden tractor. You'll find your serial number tag right underneath the ignition switch, and the serial number reads a 1978 garden tractor. The John Deere 400, which is in front of me, is rated at about 970 pounds, which equals 440 kilos. So this isn't the lightest machine out there. We have a wheelbase of 52 inches. These tires are currently set up for turf, so this machine would be properly set up for a mower deck. Up front, we have our 18 by 8.5 by 8 wheels, and in the rear, we still have the original 26 by 12 by 12s. So these rims and tires are a shade bigger than the 300 model garden tractor tires. Something I'd also like to share is the steering. The steering is completely different over the John Deere 300s. Down below on the left side of the rear fender, we have our steering valve, which is in line with the steering linkage. But this is a valve which powers the steering cylinder, which is underneath the axle. The axle is right here, and we have our steering linkage which follows down below and goes off to the other side. Power steering will be an amazing option for this garden tractor once it's up and running. When we look at the hood is a little bit wider and a little bit longer than a 300 series hood, and that accommodates the 20 horsepower engine as well as an oil cooler in front of the engine and a bigger battery with some other accessories in the instrumental panel. Around the hydraulics, we have 3 levers instead of 2 on the 300 series. We have the PTO, we have the lift for the deck, and then we have our auxiliary hydraulics lever. So these are the 3 levers that we have. On the 300 series, we only have the deck lifting mechanism, and we have the auxiliary hydraulics. This one is added on the John Deere 400 series. The instrumental panel itself looks very, very similar to the 300 series. This is basically the same setup as the 300 right now. We have the amp meter on the left, the hour meter on the right. This tractor supposedly has 965 original hours on it, so that is not a high hour tractor for a Kohler engine. I believe that's also not too bad. On the left, we have our throttle. Down below, we have our choke. We have our light switch, and we have our forward and reverse lever. Everything on this dash is similar to the John Deere 300. On the instrumental panel down below, we have the ignition switch, and we have the parking brake right there, which is a little bit further in than on the John Deere 300. The John Deere 300 has that a little bit further out on the instrumental panel. On the rear fender, in the middle, down below, we have our deck adjustment. We're missing a knob right here, but that's not too bad. And another feature which the John Deere 400 has over the John Deere 300 series is a high and a low for the rear transmission or hydraulic motor and hydraulic pump. So that's a nice feature to have as well. Next up, we have the brake pedals. On the right side of the fender, we have the right brake pedal and the left brake pedal. These can be attached or detached, so we can activate them singly or together. On the right side, we have the PTO activation lever. So when we engage this forward, a cable goes all the way onto the top, goes downwards to the front of the engine, and activates a pulley, which you guys can see right there. We have a pulley system over a PTO clutch like on the 300 series garden tractor. If you guys like the information I'm sharing with you guys, please hit that like button down below. It helps this channel massively. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. And without further ado, let's get back to the John Deere 400. Before I talk a whole bunch about the front area of the tractor, I'm going to come to the rear. We have the fuel tank, which is located exactly in the middle of the rear fender. The 300 series has it off to the right. The diesel tractors of the 300 series have it off to the left. We have two rear taillights. Too bad the left taillight does not exist, and it probably just broke off on the previous owner. I'll find a new one, and that's not a big deal, but too bad it's not on here to have the original taillight. Down below, we have some beautiful options that came with this tractor because the previous owner did have a rear rototiller, which hooks up to this 3-point hitch. Down below, we have the 3-point hitch setup. We have our lower links, which are left and right. Then we have our top link, which is adjustable. Everything works, so I'm very satisfied with that. Another option that this has for the rototiller is the rear PTO. This turns at 840 RPM. Most of the PTOs that you'll find on different tractors run at 540, and if it's a higher horsepower tractor, you'll have another 1080. So 840 is a very specific number, and therefore they have a special gearing within this gearbox behind. This right here is an option, so you guys can see it is detachable through the same mechanism that a mower deck has, so you guys can hook it up on the top, on the other side as well over here. So this is an option, and then down below we have one more option, which is the hitch. This hitch is an option. I just read that before, so that you can hook up a little trailer and go pull it around, so that's a very nice option as well. Speaking of the rear hitch, the rear PTO and the 3-point hitch, that probably paid off for the whole tractor. This was a very good deal, and I just couldn't pass on it, and that's why I will be rebuilding another John Deere. Originally, the John Deere 400 was equipped with a 20 horsepower Kohler. This Kohler model is a K532. I just previously worked on one. I tore it completely down and cleaned it, and then I realized it was not good. It was bored out to 30 over, plus it was worn. I'll leave a card up above if you guys are interested in that video, but on this engine I will be doing something similar. I might try to start it, but if I don't like the way it sounds, I will just be stripping it and making sure it runs the way it should. But when you look at the engine, it's very similar to the Bohlins. There are a couple differences. John Deere had a solenoid up front. They had the ignition coil off to the right side of the engine. On the front, we have the cable assembly, which hooks up to the front PTO lever. So there's a couple things going on up front, which are very different to the Bohlins HT20. In between the instrumental panel and the engine, we have an oil cooler down below. I'm not sure if you guys can see that, but right there is an oil cooler. So the flywheel is located on this height. We have an oil cooler right here, and therefore we have these vents to suck in the air. The air should go through the oil cooler, off to the flywheel, and then cool our cylinders on the Kohler engine, and then out the front. Looking at it from the other side, we have vents on the other side of the instrumental panel, as well as on the side panel. The engine from this side looks very similar. We have the dipstick, so we're just going to pull that up to show you guys. This has sufficient oil, so the engine was not run dry. So I'm hoping this engine will start, but if it doesn't sound right, like I mentioned, I will tear into it. Up front, within the instrumental panel, we have our battery. Something very similar to the John Deere 300 models. I believe 200 models are exactly the same. The battery is located in this area. In behind, we have all our wiring that looks very similar to what I previously did on the 300 and 317. But if this is different, I will do a complete video on the wiring of the 400. I shared with you guys the engine bay and the instrumental panel. I'll close the hood. We'll move on to the front. I touched upon this before just a little bit, But I believe the 70s models of the John Deere 400 had the front muffler. The Kohler K532, which I have inside, has the muffler which points to the side, and that comes out of the side panel. We have the same grill as a John Deere 300 series, but the tabs on the front are much beefier. So this is not really flimsy. This is a proper steel bar, and each one of these is identical. So this is much sturdier than a John Deere 300 series. I cannot take it off. I'm not sure if this is bolted on the top, but if we look behind here, the John Deere 400 does not have a PTO clutch. It has a pulley system. So we have our crankshaft pulley, which hooks up to a tensioner, and then we come down below, and this on the front would be our front PTO. It still has a little sleeve on it, so that means this front PTO must have not been used in the past. I can just pull it off, and observing the spline, it just really looks like it's new. There is still probably original grease on there, so I believe this was never used in the past. Something very nice to see. There is no damage on the front of this cover. There is this big pulley which hooks up to the PTO, so I'd have to check that and see if the groove is still in good condition. If not, we're gonna have to find a new one. Up front, we also have 4 outlets, just like on the John Deere 300 and 317. This was probably a standard feature on any John Deere 400 series. I shared with you guys a whole bunch of information on the John Deere 400, my new project. I will have some upcoming episodes on this here as I tear into things. Until then, I will still be working on the John Deere 300. I will have some more videos on the 317, the Bohlins HT20. I will be continuing to work on the Thomas HL173, and not to forget the Gravely GMT 9000. I have a whole bunch of projects here, so stick around and we'll have some epic footage once everything is completed.